Calling and bulolo with whatever we do. Jioni safu no la with whatever we do. Hale school. Nyepamne ne kudlukula. Nyepangi ragala gena. Nyepamne ne kudlukula. Ibuloke nungoto ni beti sola. Ibuloke dato ni betoto.
Bigi Congo.
Lamin.
Na?
Lamin te jibe norin te nyame Lamin.
Kabana wulo kono.
Wulo kono nyinta mo Lamin.
Pabilenki.
Muna ngata afongole.
Haina.
Ngata. Ngoto le. Fabrama.
Mingi. Baba nyola.
Namu le Fabrama.
Namu jumara kan kuma diten.
Fabrama.
Jumara mu.
Ndele bare muso.
Lunda mana. Jamani mbere.
Alindo ko.
Jamani.
Bari ngoto mo kontande.
Bari jamani fana na mudu wa kontan.
Ngoto minaka ngala min de fon filitala. Lamin jibe nori nyala.
Lamin ida siran sama ne benki. Yala so tol sayni no ko mo lakko momo.
Ngoto.
Nam.
Itedinte alo ne Lamin hakilo diata bake karambugoto. Anu santeng ministry ko di ngole si suwo ko amake ko do holi de
si bitun
bagona de
ala ni ko kede namo
ala ni na ko na karta bulo be dam ala ni je
ngodo
nam
ngoto mon kontan fere
jamani mu nekeda
ite ka Lamin wulo ko no nyintay mon ko do fete malo Lamin nyande sila la be la moy kala karango
jamani karamol be soron ne ko fasita wulo ko nako
karambugol ma soron ni ko karambugol soron da amake kom holiday lem ngodo dini ngo nyanta sila la ala karango mo yamen kamen fue man kontan andamande
alla nyin kombo courant adanda la kombo la jankara mol soron da goro kamen courant ma raro la kombo e don dol fana na karamol soron je karamol soron Lamin ara lo nyino la amanta fe na sokon ala mu nekela
am Lamin ite fete ma ko le sinol be ke kar radio to
nga fine
e ko nyana di mod Lamin ya mu na nye
bi kabin mina kan ntambita nteri manyin Fatu tambide la sukala ala diningol bebe siri be la moyka
Faru danso am fana tambida jele ni subala la ngaje diningol be jet talanta nen kili warol e be seri jele
sa Lamin fadante kili wo ke no la ba Lamin bitaka wulo ko no nyinta mo Lamin
amandara fenela
ite dine ko ni man si yakari la sino la moy radio to balon na
muneka ke afone ba nyara ni alon
telentel jikot
afone ba munebe ke
ite balontel be jikiri ni man karam ku kele yaje nata karana mbasa malaya ay tarije
par ñarande kombo ko findira kombo ide na raje den sonka ba men manya tala wulo ko aru kara mo be so afanya membe
ko to wole nati ba ngalle ni Lamin kuntala kombo kurang o ka fa me kombo kurang asototal wala kinai ko e sisu ko no bari ni ko e sisu ko no be karang di ke la radio ni telel to hani tele masoto to nyaay man tele soto la bungo bar radio be bulan ko to batiri sanga ay si ay alamo
sa do kala nyaadi
ko ta o bulaji
ado kala nyaadi
kamun ke nyaadi
radio abo mo la be mona falaje
ibe la karandirol kala jele
ti talle be radio ko men ka karande
ila subject ro baby jele baby jele
wala nanga coco moy fa dan so wolya ngombe tambi kana ngadi ningol de be ikadum bungo de ko kala
ma asototal de
Lamin mala be kara wala de
bari laftalal ideal on ko inde every year second wala fourth
muna ni ko di ko nde ko folle sinila ba ndele sinilo ne ba
mbasa mba foke en koto wole fango yen wulindi yalo famo keta bat yin fana bulata ko ko me yen nati jambi Lamin nyanta karana ntel beji ko be nyineka ya bulay kara wulo kono ta kilar ya bambalo yo be bulaje koto dindi ngoy si ayala le sino la moy radio
wora ka munda kara mo man so Lamin nyanta kara si so na radio
la sila le ayala le sino
na ko smolong
kilar ya
mo be ngala ko momo sa mbi do ni ko no kera
mengi bruso
no ko do la da ba rosa no bari woro radio ni abe jele ba do ngamra do man dembe buljan dala nyara nyara ko fendi mo la Lamin tayra ba rosa
bara te ku folo ajibe nori nya labi tamete ku
mengi mun na de
teku
bari ko do famo ke
ja e ma nani nyambol si zol ye kisigi man si zol no le kabun ka nyoma bari nyambu kino ni manya na ka fin ni nambe ko so la ni nambe ko so la
ngale limbeta de be nyambo do dilanna
nyara ni ko rin fennat nyara nata
bari famo kada
ngata bun kono tabi bun kono nyara ngando ko fele ko ke baru nganda ni pelo la dija
iyo awa la
bun kono bismillah bisu diara
pendulala ye fongo tanka sina dolu tanka koro ta koro
Hello viewers and listeners. I want to welcome you back on Science LBS lessons. Today our topic is going to be the skeletal system. The skeletal system of our body. The skeletal system of our body. But before we get into the skeletal system, we had some questions that we were supposed to do before we meet. And the questions were 3. The first question was asking, what do the kidneys produce as waste products? What do the kidneys produce as waste products? Check your book. The answer is urine. U-R-I-N-E. Urine. Number 2. What taste is your sweat? What taste is your sweat? The possible answer is salt. The taste of our sweat is salt or salty. Number 3, what is the byproduct of oxygen in our body? The byproduct or the waste product of oxygen is carbon dioxide. Check against your work. Number 1, what do the kidneys produce as waste product? Urine is the answer. Number 2, what taste is your sweat? Salt. Number 3, what is the byproduct of oxygen in our body? It is carbon dioxide. So check against your work and mark your own book. All right, so well done. Now we move to the lesson proper, that is the skeletal system. When we say skeleton or skeletal system, this is talking about the bones of our body. It is talking about the bones of our body. No matter how big they are or how small they are, collectively together they are called the skeleton. Now, what would you like if you had no skeleton? If I had no skeleton, those of you viewing me, how would I look like? Or you who is sitting down watching on the screen, how would you look like? Would you be able to stand up? Would you be able to stand up? If there were no bones in our body or in your body, would you be able to stand up? The answer is no. Would you be able to walk? The possible answer is no. So if there were no bones in our bodies, we would not be able to stand up, we would not be able to walk. So our bodies are supported by a framework of bones called skeleton. Our body is supported by a framework of bones. Framework of bones, which is called what? The skeleton or the skeletal system. Without bones, we would not be able to stand up and would lie on the ground. If there were no bones on me, I would not be able to stand up. I would have been lying on the ground all the time. The skeleton also enables us to move, protect our vital organs. The skeleton enables us to move and protects our vital organs. The bones that we have on our body not only help us to move from one place to another, but they are protectors of our very important organs. Like in our previous lesson, I said the lungs and the heart are found in a cage called the rib cage. The rib cage are bones, series of bones connected to the backbone that covers the lungs and the lungs and the heart. The lungs, heart, and the liver. So therefore, the bones of our body do not only help us to move, but they also help to protect our important organs or vital organs. Let's look at the skeletal system down there. You have the skull. The skull, you have the rib cage, you have the spine, you have the pelvis, you have the scapula, you have the humerus, you have the radius, and the femur. These are not the only bones in our body, but they are one of them, and they are also important. When we say skull, when we say the skull is talking about the bones of the head. The skull are the bones of the head. The bones on our head is what we call the skull, S-K-U-L-L, skull. The rib cage, these are series of bones connected to each other against the backbone. They are found on the upper part of our body. They are enclosing or protecting the liver, the lungs, and the heart. The spine, they are series of bones like this, connected to series of bones like this, connected to each other, from the neck right down to the tail. From the neck right down to the tail. The pelvis, this is the white bone around our hip here. This white bone here is what we call the pelvis. The scapula is the bone here, at the upper part below your shoulder, below the shoulder bone. The humerus, this is the upper part of your arm. That bone that you have there is the humerus. Then the radius, if you lay your hand like this, or if you place your hand like this, stretch it straight, the bone, if you feel your hand, if you press your fingers against your hand here, you will realize that there are two bones there. The outer one is what we call the radius. The outer bone of your hand is what we call the radius, and is the bigger one. Then the smaller one that is inside is what we call the ulna. Right? So these are the two bones below the elbow. The two bones of your hand below the elbows are the radius and the ulna. The radius is the outer one, and the ulna is the inside one. Any of the hands, whether the left or the right, any of the hands that you stretch, the outer one is the radius, the inner one is the ulna. Then if you come to the bones of our leg, the bones of our leg from our hip joint here, right down to our knee here, that long bone is only one, and that one is called the femur. If you go below the knee, against the ankle, there are also two bones there. They are the tibia and the fibula. So you have so many bones in our body. We're going to look at most of them one at a time. The functions of the skeleton. The skeleton basically has three functions. The skeleton has three main functions. It helps us to move. 2, it protects our organs. And 3, it supports us. It helps us to move. It helps us to move. It protects our organs, and it supports us to be able to do so many types of work. These are the three functions of the skeleton: move, protect, support. It says supports and gives shape to the body. The skeleton is the one that makes us nice. If there were no bones in our body, we were not going to look like this. We were not going to be able to stand. We were not going to be able to have this shape in our body. It is this skeleton that helps us, like we said, is the framework of our bones. Framework of bones. This framework of bones, they are the ones that give shape to the body. They don't only give shape, but they also protect the important internal organs, such as what? Such as what? The skull protects the brain. The bones of the head, we call it skull. They protect what? They protect what we call the brain. The brain. The skull protects the brain. The ribcage protects the heart and the lungs. And the backbone protects the spinal cord. The backbone, like I said, is the series of bones from the neck right down to the tail. They are connected from the neck right down to our tail. These bones are what we call backbone. Inside the backbone, there is a semi-liquid thing. There is a semi-liquid, we call it spinal cord. It is this backbone that protects the spinal cord. It also helps us to move. That is the skeleton. Now we have an activity here. Finding your bones. Number 1, say, find the following bones and feel how they move. The skull, they are the bones of our head. The jawbone, the backbone, the ribs, the hips, the femur, humerus, radius, and ulna. How do you find them and feel how they move? Let's start with our skull. Let's start with our skull. The skull, we said, is what? The skull are the bones of the head. Now this skull, let's see. Do it move? The bones of the head, do they move? No, they don't move. They don't move. They do not move. The bones of our head do not move. The jawbone. The jawbone. Let's look at our jaw. Do they move? Yes, the jawbone, they move. The jawbone, they move. You can move them up and down. They move. Look at the backbone. Backbone, that is the bone at the back here. Does it move? Let's see. I can bend down using my backbone. I can also bend at the back using my backbone. So the backbone moves. The ribs. The ribs, they are the cage cage protecting the lungs and the heart. Do they move? Like we said, we breathe in and breathe out. If you breathe in, they move up. If you breathe out, they move down. So our ribs also move. Our ribs move. The hip. Here is the hip. Do our hip move? Do our hip move? The hip bone here, it can move. It can rotate side by side. It also moves. The femur. the femur, that's the long bone of your leg. The long bone here, between the knee to the hip joint. Does it move? Yes. The humerus, that's the upper part of your hand. The radius and the ulna, they all move. They all move, but different direction. Almost all of them move, except the skull. The bones of the head do not move. Like number 2 say, do all the bones move in the same way? No. Are there any bones that do not move? Yes. Yes. Example, the bones of the head, the skull, does not move. What are the bones like in other animals? What are the bones like other animals? The bones in our body and the bones in other animals, they are all the same. They are all the same. All what we have skull, they have skull. We have rib cage, they have rib cage. We have backbone, they have backbones. They have tail, we have tail. When I say tail, you don't see the tail of human beings, but we have tail right from the neck right to the tail here, at the end point of your body. So that's it, we are like them. It is saying we have so many bones in our body. Sometimes you see two bones that are meeting together, and they work hand in hand to function. It says the place where two bones meet is called a joint. A place where two bones meet, it is called a joint. It is called a joint where two bones meet. For example, my hand here, the humerus, where the humerus and the radius are connected, that joint is a joint. Basically, there are 3 types of joints in our body. One of them is ball and socket. Ball and socket joint. Ball and socket joint. Example, the shoulder bone and the hip joint. The shoulder bone and the hip joint, they are ball and socket joint. When we say ball and socket joint, they are both like, it is like this. This is the socket. This is the socket. And this is the ball. The ball fits in the socket. And the ball here is round. So the ball and socket joint is one of them. An example of ball and socket joint is found on our shoulder bone here and hip joint here. The second one is sliding joint. Sliding joint. Example of sliding joints is the wrist joint. The wrist joint. The wrist joint, the joint between the hand proper and the other part of the hand, that is the radius. The ankle joint is another. So sliding joints are this one. We will look at them one by one, how they move. Then the third one is the hinge joint. The hinge joint. The hinge joint. Example of hinge joint is the elbow here, the knee, right? So now let's look at them one by one. The ball and socket joint, we see example of them are the shoulder bone, the shoulder joint and the hip joint. They are ball and socket joint. How do they move? If you can roll your hand, you can keep your hand going round and round. So because of this ball is fitted to this socket here, it can move round and round. The ball and the socket are, if they are fitted together, it can, and the ball, we know that the shape of a ball is round, so that's why you can rotate your hand, you can swing it in anyhow. So it moves round and round. The sliding joint is example of the wrist joint and the ankle. Let's look at my wrist joint here. This is the wrist joint. I can move it up and I can move it back. So they move up, forward and backward. Sliding joints move forward and backward. They move forward and backward. Understand that? An example of a sliding joint. Look at some of our doors. You can open them by pushing inside, you go. You can also pull them and go in. So the sliding joint is also like that. You can fold it up, it can move up, you can bend it down again. So these two ways. The hinge joint. How does it move? The hinge joint, example, the elbow. The elbow joint here. The elbow joint can only move one way. It can move only one way. I can close it up here, but I cannot bend it down. When I bend it down, it goes straight and lock. It will not pass there. But up this way, I can fold it. Knee joint, this one, I can bend it up there. I can hold it and bend it this way. But I cannot bend it the opposite direction. No. So hinge joint can only bend one way. Example of hinge joint is the elbow and the knee. It says some joints are fused together. That is, they are fixed together and cannot move. Some of the joints, they are fixed together. They cannot move. Example, the bones of the head. That is the skull. The bones of the head, they do not move. They are fixed together. They cannot move. So these are the three joints that we have in our body. Ball and socket joint, example the soldier joint and the hip joint. Sliding joint, example is the wrist joint and ankle joint. Hinge joint is example the elbow joint and knee joint. Sliding joint can rotate. We can say it can rotate. Ball and socket joint, we can say it can rotate. While sliding joint, what happened? It can move forward and backward. Forward and backward. While hinge joints, example the elbow and the knee joint, they can only move forward. They only move forward, but they cannot move backward. Ball and socket joint, they rotate. Sliding joint, they move forward and backward. Hinge joint, they move only forward. They cannot move backward. And that of the bones of the head, they don't move at all. Okay? Right. We move. Sometimes we can damage the bones or joints. For example, when we fall down from a tree, usually during mango season, you see many children, they have problems on their bones. When they climb up, sometimes they come down with the mango fruit. When they fall off from the tree, a bone may be fractured. A bone may be fractured. The break of a bone is what we call a fracture. The break of a bone, is what we call fracture. Right? When you fall off from a tree, one of the bones may get broken cracked or of that nature. And that is what we call fracture. Like it says, a fracture is a break or crack in a bone. And it's very painful, and it takes time before the bone is mended. Painful and takes time before the bone is mended. So that's the bones of our body. We said we would not be able to stand up, or we would not be able to walk if there were no bones in our body. We all agreed that. We said our bodies are supported by a framework of bones called a skeleton. Without bones, we would not be able to stand up and would lie on the ground like a jelly. The skeleton also enables us to move and protects our vital organs. It is the skeleton that is why we are able to move, and it is the skeleton that is why our heart and lungs are not broken all the time, because they are so soft. If they had no protector, if somebody knocked you on the chest, was going to break them. The bones are here. The bones of the head, always remember that they are called the skull. The bones of the head are always skull. The rib cage, what is the function of the rib cage? The rib cage protects the lungs and the heart. Right? Good. The spine is they are the bones of your backbone. The pelvis, this is the wide bone around our hip here. The scapula is the bone underneath your shoulder bone. The humerus is the upper bone of our hand. The humerus is the upper bone of our hand. The radius is the outer bone of our lower bones. In the lower hand, you have two bones there. The outer, if you stretch your hands, the outer bone is always bigger, and that one is called the radius. Then on our leg, from the hip joint to the knee, that one is called the femur, and many others. So these are some of the bones we have. So they all have different functions. The functions of the skeleton, we said it supports, protects, and helps us to move. Supports and gives shape to our body. Protects. What protects? The skull protects the brain. The ribcage protects the heart and lungs. The backbone protects the spinal cord. And it also helps us to move. Right? Activities found in your bones, you can feel how your bones are moving. The skull, the bones of the head, you can feel whether it moves. The jaw bones, you can feel. Open your jaws or your mouth and see. If you open your mouth, you see the bones, the jaw bones are moving up and down. The backbone, you can feel that the backbone, you can bend down like this. You can bend in the opposite direction. So it tells you the backbone moves. The rib cage, if you breathe in and out, you can feel how the rib cage is moving, how the ribs are moving up and down. The hips, you can also roll like this, rotate like this. You can move like this, sideways, it rotates. Okay? Because there also you have the legs, the shoulder bone here, you have a ball and socket joint. This leg also can be moved like you are moving your arm. Right? So the next question is asking, do all bones move in the same direction? No. Not all bones move the same direction. Some of them, like we said, they rotate. Some of them move forward and backward, while others move only forward. Some of them, they rotate, they move only by rotation. That is the ball and socket. And while the others, while sliding joint, they can only move forward and backward. They cannot rotate. Like the hinge joint, they can only move forward. It cannot rotate. It cannot move backward. Example of ball and socket joint is they are the shoulder bone and the hip joint. Sliding joint, example of that is the wrist joint and ankle joint. Hinge joint, example of hinge joint is the elbow and the knee joint. Some joints are fused together or they are fixed together, they cannot move. Example of such bones are the skull. Skull, they don't move. Sometimes we damage the bones. Sometimes we can damage the bones or joints. By how? When we fall down from a tree or even at the field, a bone may be fractured. And a fracture of a bone is very painful and it will take a long time before it is mended. A fracture is a break or crack in a bone. Now we have an exercise. We have an exercise that we are going to do. Get ready. The first question is asking, when a bone is broken, it is called a dash dash. Number 2, the bones of the head are called a dash dash. Number 3, an example of a bone and a socket joint is dash dash. Number 4, the place where two bones meet is called a dash dash. Complete your work quickly. Good. Good. I hope you have finished your work. Yes. Let's try together. Let's do the corrections together. Number 1. When a bone is broken, it is called a what? It is called a fracture. It is called a fracture. F-A-R-C-T-U-R-E. It is called a fracture. Number 2, the bones of the head are called the bones on our head, they are called what? They are called a skull. The bones of the head is called a skull, S-K-U-L-L. Good. Number 3, an example of a ball and socket joint is what? An example of a ball and socket joint is what? An example of a ball and socket joint from our previous lesson, from our explanation, is the soldier joint, is the hip joint and the soldier joint. Hip joint and soldier joint, these are the examples of soldier, ball and socket joint. Any of them that you have is correct. If you have hip joint, fine. If you have soldier joint, fine. Then number 4, the place where two bones meet is called a. The place where two bones meet is called a joint. J-O-I-N-T-S. It's called a joint. It is called a joint. When it is one, it is more than one, you add S there. It is called a joint. Then our correction, the answers are number 1, fracture, skull, hip joint or soldier joint, then joint, right? That is the bones. When a bone is broken, it is called a fracture. The bones of the head are called skull. The example of ball and socket joint is the hip joint or the soldier joint, and a place where two bones meet is called a joint. Then, before I take a leave of you, I want to give you an assignment that you are going to complete before we meet again. Number 1, name the 3 long bones in our arm, in our hand. Name the 3 long bones in our hand. Number 2, name the 3 long bones in our legs. Number 3, name the 3 functions of the skeleton. And number 4, a framework of our body is called a dash dash. I read again. Number 1, name the 3 long bones in our hand. Number 2, name the 3 long bones in our legs. Number 3, name the 3 functions of the skeleton. And number 4, a framework of our body is called a dash dash. So I am expecting this to be done before we meet once again. So until we meet, say bye-bye.